So, welcome one more time to this teaching on Fratelli Tutti. Actually, Fratelli Tutti is an encyclical letter written by Pope Francis. It is the third encyclical letter written by him. And the theme is over, I would say, fraternity and solidarity. Just a quick reminder, the Pope actually has written previously two other encyclicals. The first one was Lumen Fidei. In French, it is La Lumière de la Foi, and in English, The Light of Faith, released in June 2013. And actually, there is something very special about this first encyclical, because it was started by the former Pope, Benedict XVI, and then it has been completed and approved by Pope Francis and released. And after that, after the first encyclical, Francis had also written another one called Laudato Si. So Laudato Si also is well known. It's well known in the world because of the fact that it was the first time actually for a pope to be talking about these kind of things. Previously, it was linked directly to faith, to charity, to things related directly to the pastoral of the church. But this time, it was a bit different. So Laudato Si on the care of our common home. That was in May 2015. And I would say that Saint Francis of Assisi, that we all know, played an important role on the fact that Pope Francis has decided to write something about the care for our common home. So Laudato Si. So I would say even he has inspired Pope Francis to do so. And it will be actually the same for Fratelli Tutti also. Fratelli Tutti, which is recent, the last one for the moment, the third one in October 2020, which is, as I said, over fraternity and social friendship. So this also was inspired in a way by Saint Francis of Assisi. And in the life of Saint Francis of Assisi, we can see that he had a great love for the creation, because there is a kind of reflection of God's glory, of God's beauty in the creation. But also he had a deep sense of fraternity, of friendship, and so on. That is what is interesting in Saint Francis of Assisi's life. He had really that sense of realism, actually, seeing God through what exists, what surrounds us, and so on, being able to go, I would say, from what exists to the Creator. We can't see Him, but through what exists, we can, I would say, go back to Him and realize that beyond what we can see, there exists someone who is finally at the fount, at the basis of what exists and what you can see and admire and so on. So Fratelli Tutti. And there is also something that Saint Thomas Aquinas said about it. He was an Italian saint from the Middle Age, and he wrote something about how to discover God's existence, how to go back to God's existence. And there are 5 ways of going back to God, 5 ways of discovering God's existence. And one of those 5 ways is to go from what exists to the Creator, to go from what exists to God Himself, who has created the universe. And I would say that Saint Francis of Assisi understood not only the value of creation, but also how brotherly love is important in our lives. He understood these words of the Apostle St. John, 1 John chapter 4, verse 20. If someone says, I love God, but at the same time hates his brother, he is a liar. For whoever does not love the brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. And this is written in the Bible. And I would say that Francis of Assisi understood it well. And when Jesus himself gave the new commandment to his disciples, he said something important. He added something important, saying that this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. You are my friends if you do what I command you. And what Jesus commands his disciples to do, he himself does it. That is also what is important in Jesus' life. He did not only say, do this, and then, go, I am praying for you, I'm giving you the graces you need so that you may be able to do it. But he did it first. He showed actually the example. He loved his disciples to the end, and then he invited his disciples to love one another. He spread the good news. He also sent his disciples to spread the good news. He loved them before asking them to love one another. And this is important because the example is what inspires actually much. You can say things, you can convince people through what you say, but if your example is not there to invite people to follow what you are saying, it won't last. And we see that Jesus, in his life, he showed the example before actually asking his disciples to do the same. And at the washing of the feet, for example, the gospel says something that I found really interesting. It says this: it was now just before the Passover feast, and Jesus knew that his hour had come to leave this world and return to his Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the very end. To love to the very end. What does that mean? I don't know if you have ever asked yourself the question. To love to the very end. What does it mean actually? It may have at least two meanings. Loving to the very end. It may mean to love forever. This is true actually. Loving someone forever. And Jesus loved his disciples, and he loved us today to the very end, which means he loved us forever. His love for us will have no end. And there is a saint, and I like this, who said that God loves you today as he loved you yesterday and as he will love you tomorrow. So this is important. God does not change. And today we celebrated the feast of, the memorial of Saint Teresa of Avila. She says God never changed. God is always the same. And this is also something which is inspiring actually. And this is true. But there is another side of this. The second side is God's love for his disciples goes to the very extreme. God has loved his disciples. Jesus, God made man, has loved his disciples to the very end, to, I would say, the extreme, to the point of giving his life for his disciples. And these are the two meanings that I can see hidden behind the fact that Jesus has loved his disciples to the very end. So, apart from those two encyclicals, we see that Pope Francis wrote also Apostolic Exhortations. I don't know if you have asked yourself already this question about the differences between Apostolic Exhortations and encyclicals. So, we have, for example, Evangelii Gaudium on the proclamation of the gospel in today's world, which was released in 2013. We also have Amoris Laetitia, a post-synodal apostolic exhortation on love in the family, which was released in 2016. Also, Gaudete and Exultate on the call to holiness in today's world, the call to holiness. And this is also interesting. The call to holiness is not reserved to only few people. It is not reserved to the chosen ones. It is common to all of us, no matter what is the state of life that we follow. Whether we are married people or priest or nun or I don't know what else, we all are called to holiness. So if you are, for example, doubting about your vocation, at least you know that the call to holiness is for you. It is a vocation which is reserved for everyone actually. So we also have Querida Amazonia, which is a post-synodal exhortation to the people of God and to all persons of goodwill, which was released in 2020, February. So, Querida Amazonia means beloved Amazon. This was very recent also. So what is now, before coming back to Fratelli Tutti, I would like to say something about the differences between those different kinds of papal documents. Apostolic Exhortations, encyclical letters, and so on. So, Apostolic Exhortations, they are frequently written after a special synod, and they are usually meant to encourage people in a particular spiritual topic. For example, it can be holiness, it can be evangelization, it can be education, and so on. Whereas encyclical letters, they are official papal documents sent to the bishops and to the priest, but through them to all the people of goodwill actually, to all Christians, to you, to me, to everyone, and which focuses on a particular topic, which can be a doctrine, a Catholic doctrine, and so on. It can be faith, it can be moral issues, and so on. But there exist also other kinds of papal documents, apostolic letters or messages that are more pastoral, that are not meant to be talking about specific doctrines, but that are more pastoral. We remember, for example, Pope Saint Paul VI, who wrote Humanae Vitae in 1968, meaning of human life on the regulation of birth. And this was actually not well received in the church. I don't know if you heard about it, but it was not well received in the church because of the fact that not only people were expecting something different, but it was extremely direct. So it was controversial but prophetical. And today it needs, according to me, to be better understood and spread. Better understood and spread. And this document was actually, surprisingly, I would say, much more received outside the church than inside the church. So it depends on the places, but it's sometimes the case like that. So let's come back now to Fratelli Tutti. This was to show that there exist some differences between those different kind of papal documents, but overall they are meant to invite people to convert, to invite people to discover the truth and to follow the truth, to let themselves be transformed by the truth. Fratelli Tutti now, meaning, as I said, all brothers, and we can rightly add all sisters also, brothers and sisters. We are all brothers and sisters. So the context of this encyclical letter, how did the Pope decide to write something about fraternity and social friendship? He says at the beginning of the encyclical that actually he himself was, and he is even now, concerned about reconciliation and peace. How to build a peaceful society, for example, those are questions that he has in his mind. How to really be brothers and sisters. What does it mean to be brothers and sisters? Also, the Pope himself says that this encyclical is also, I would say, an outcome of few meetings that he did in the recent past. He says this, that issues of human fraternity and social friendship have always been a concern of him. So he has spoken of them over the past few years with different people and on different occasions. And he was also encouraged by the Grand Imam Ahmed Al-Tayyab, whom he met in Abu Dhabi. We remember that recently he went to Abu Dhabi, and there he met the Grand Imam, who encouraged him to write something about it. So he is concerned about how our society is being, I would say, ruled, but not really being ruled, but how things are going in the society, how also fraternity is being threatened in our world. Now, there is a question that we can rightly ask ourselves. I don't know if for you it is obvious or not, but we may be wondering about the universality of fraternal love. Fraternal love is universal. Okay, but how is it the case? How is it the case? How can we say that we all are brothers and sisters? There are many people that we haven't yet met, that there are many people that we will never meet, but we are invited to consider them as our brothers and sisters. So it is not, so fraternity is not only reserved to the people surrounding me, surrounding us, but how is that possible? People that we do not know. It seems actually to be theoretical, to be loving, people living, I don't know, we were talking about Amazon here, people living in the Amazon region, or people living in Africa, in Asia, and so on, that we do not know and that maybe we won't have the chance of meeting. How is that possible to consider them as brothers and sisters and to really be brothers and sisters, thinking of them? And there is something else that I like to mention. Who is my neighbor? This is a question that we may be asking ourselves and also trying to find answers. Who is my neighbor? So, my neighbor is not, first of all, the one who lives on the other side of the continent, for example. Otherwise, it would be very easy to love people we do not know. It would be very easy to show charity to people we haven't met yet. For example, we know people through social media, through TV. We know them because they are famous, but we do not know their less positive side. For example, when you live with people, you may discover slowly but surely their less positive side, their qualities, yes, but also their defaults and so on, their faults and so on. So in that case, you are first of all invited to consider the one who lives close to you as your neighbor. But there is no opposition actually between considering my flatmate, my classmate, my colleague, my neighbor in a physical sense, I mean the one who lives close to me next door, considering him as my neighbor is not opposed to considering everyone else as being our brothers and sisters, as being our neighbors, finally. And that is what, we will try to understand here, because, there is no contradiction actually between what the Pope is trying to show here and the fact that my neighbor is first of all the one who lives close to me, the one I can see. I'm invited to love, to show charity to a concrete person, not first of all to someone who is living or who has even lived in the past that I won't meet and that I won't have the opportunity of seeing, maybe the less attractive side, which is also there to be accepted, and that is interesting to highlight here. And now, how do we consider ourselves as brothers and sisters? As I said, we might not know each other, but we are still invited to consider everyone as brothers and sisters. There are some some reasons. I don't know if you already thought about it. The reasons why we are invited to consider everyone as brothers and sisters. And I followed actually a conference on Fratelli Tutti, and the speaker gave 2 reasons that I found interesting and that I'm gonna share now with you. First of all, the first reason, I don't know if it was obvious for you, but actually it is the fact that we all have the same Father. We all have the same Father. Having the same Father is one of the reasons, I would say the main reason, to consider everyone as being brothers and sisters. And in the Bible itself, if you take Matthew 23, 8-9, Jesus says to his disciples, "You are not to be called Rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers." You are one teacher, and you are all brothers. "And do not call anyone on earth Father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven." So, I don't know what you may be thinking on hearing this passage. Jesus saying, "Do not call anyone on earth Father." Whereas we have our fathers, we have also priests that we call Father. And is it a way of not following what Jesus said here? I would say that Jesus is not actually in this passage inviting people to not call their fathers Father, but he is inviting people, I would say, to realize that fatherhood is linked to the only, I would say, deep fatherhood of God. God is Father, and every other fatherhood comes from God and is a kind of participation, a kind of reflection of God's fatherhood itself, I would say. So we know that Jesus Christ made himself a man, and he had an adopted earthly father, Saint Joseph. So here it has to be, I would say, understood in that way. But anyway, what I wanted to highlight is the fact that Jesus said in the Bible that you are all brothers and you have the same Father. So this is one of the foundations. And being one of the foundations, it also shows that fraternity has something to do with faith. Fraternity has something to do with faith. If then you do not have faith in God, if you do not believe in God as being a Father, you may find it difficult to consider everyone else as being your brother or your sister. But it is not always the same, the case, because we may meet people who do not actually explicitly believe in God, but who may be friendly to other people that exist. But just showing through this first foundation that fraternity may have something to do with faith. And there is another foundation, another reason, but I would like just to deepen this fact. So, according to this passage, the foundation of our brotherhood and sisterhood is the fact that we have the same Father. So, fraternity is then an expression of our faith. The two of them are deeply linked. But there is something also that needs to be mentioned here. In the passage, Jesus is talking to his disciples. Then, does it mean that the disciples are brothers because they have been created by the same person, the Father, or because they are members of the same community, the community of the apostles? Or we may extend the question, are you brothers and sisters because you have the same Father, or because you are, for example, from the same country, or you speak the same language, or you are from the same parish, the same group, the same ethnic group? In some countries, you may find ethnic groups and so on. So are you to consider the other person as a brother or as a sister because that person is from your small group, or because that person has been created by God? This is a question that we may ask ourselves, and that is actually interesting in the process of understanding how sisterhood and brotherhood is important in our life. So then, if we say that we are brothers according to the second aspect, then what about our relationship with those who do not belong to our community, whatever it may be? With, for example, the non-believers, if we say that, the only reason why we consider the other people as being brothers and sisters is the fact that they have been created by God. What about those who do not believe? For them, it may be a bit, I would say, they won't put that aspect they won't shed light on that aspect, and it may be a bit complicated to talk about it in that way. But anyway, it is one of the foundations, and it is interesting actually to highlight it here. But also, there is still a natural tendency of getting together when we have something in common. In our communities, for example, or here in the Netherlands, when you meet someone, for example, when you are living here but not from here, you meet someone who is from your country, there is a link. There is a link which is there, an obvious one, maybe which is not as strong as with the other people. When you meet other people who are not from your country, the link may not be that strong at the beginning, at least. So the natural tendency of getting together when we have something in common exists, but there is no opposition actually between them, and that is what we are invited to discover through this encyclical. Then fraternity requires that we may be able to go beyond all of those, I would say, tendencies that exist, that are not wrong, that have to be considered, that have to be taken into account. But fraternity is actually larger, I would say, than the simple fact of being from the same community, or sharing the same faith, or belonging to the same group, and so on. So the other reason is the one that we find in the parable of the Good Samaritan. Here we see that the Good Samaritan was not from, we'll be talking about it maybe after we can take a gap at a certain point, at a certain time. So the Good Samaritan was not from the country or the region in which he was to actually help the person who was lying on the ground. He was from another place, but he still showed that he is a neighbor for someone else. He is a neighbor for someone else, then that someone else is also a brother for him. So, as a summary, I would say that fraternal love requires that we may go beyond all of those considerations, and charity, that actually we have to show to one another, makes no distinction of religion, of community, of country, and so on. So, if I am brother because we have the same God, then I have to consider everyone living on earth, everyone as my brother, as my sister, because there exists only one God. Even though in some religions the way we go to God may be different, but there exists one God. I would say does not exist two God or three gods and so on. There exists one God who is the creator of everything that exists in the world. And the God in whom we believe is also a father. He is not only the creator, but also the Father. And it would be even easier to discover God as a creator. I mean, it would be the first step to discover God as a creator than to discover him as a father. This is another step, and we actually need faith to consider God as not only a creator, which is true, but also a father. And considering him as a father leads us to actually consider also everyone else as a brother, as a sister. And this is, I found it really interesting to highlight it, to see how fraternity can have a link with faith, how fraternity is deeply linked with the fact that we believe, with the fact that we actually worship also, because believing is to be linked to worshiping also, worshiping God, believing in God, and so on. So this is the first step that I wanted to mention. I don't know if you have any questions or any reaction, anything to add, anything to ask about what has been said, or about anything else linked to the topic. Okay, so let's come back and go on. So your question, Alexander, was how to concretely consider the other people as brothers and sisters, concretely, not only theoretically speaking. And I was saying that actually we maybe are not invited to be calling everyone brother or sister, but to mean or to behave as brothers and sisters. And that is what we will be seeing now in this parable of the Good Samaritan. And who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? This is a good question, actually. And the question, I don't know if you read the passage recently. We all already heard about the passage because it is a famous one. The question was asked by a lawyer who wanted to justify himself. That is what is written in the gospel. A lawyer asked a question to Jesus because he wanted to justify himself. So the question is, and who is my neighbor? And the question is not who is my neighbor, but and who is my neighbor? It's beautifully asked, I would say. And the question is not out of context, actually. It may still be in our minds. We are invited, to give a personal answer to that question. Who do I have to consider as my neighbor, as my brother, as my sister? Who do I... Actually, that is the question. Saying, and who is my neighbor, is as if he was saying, who do I have to consider as my neighbor? Maybe I have to consider some as my neighbors and some not less, some really not at all. Who is my neighbor? And the Pope shows here that this parable has something to do with the relationship between Cain and his brother Abel in the book of Genesis. So from the very beginning, we see how difficult brotherhood can be. From the very beginning. What happened? Do you remember what happened between Cain and Abel? The first two brothers, what happened to them?
Cain killed Abel?
Exactly, they didn't kill each other, but Cain, killed Abel. So, this is, I would say, a good example to show how fraternity can be difficult, because the first two brothers, their relationship ended up in a fratricide. And the answer that Cain gave to God, asking him, "Where is your brother Abel?" Do you remember the answer? Where is your brother Abel? That was a question that you don't remember.
God asked him, "Where is your brother?"
Yeah.
Abel, no?
Yeah, that was the question.
Yeah, was asking.
Yeah. Now the answer that he gave, yeah, exactly. He had already, unfortunately, killed him, and he said, "Am I my brother's keeper?" That was the answer of that Cain gave to God, asking, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And the Pope says that we are actually all sometimes tempted of giving the same answer to God asking us the question. Maybe God does not ask us the question as he did for Abel. We do not, hear God's voice. For example, you wake up in the morning, and then you hear a voice asking you, "What did you do yesterday? Where are your brothers and sisters?" and so on. God does not ask us today the question in that way, but actually we may be invited to give an answer to this question, and sometimes we are tempted of saying, "Am I my brother's keeper? Am I responsible?" If I had to translate it, am I responsible for my brothers and sisters, and so on. But by asking this question, God wants to show that man's indifference cannot be justified. There is no room for it. God placed him face to face with his responsibility. By asking this, as if God was putting him face to face with his responsibility, showing him that, yes, he has a role to play in keeping his brother, in keeping, we can extend, his brothers or sisters, and so on. But before this, the Pope made a kind of assessment over what is going on in our societies. And the title in the book, the title of that assessment is "Dark Clouds Over a Closed World." So it is sad actually to realize that the world is becoming a closed world. It is not getting open, wide to welcome everyone, foreigners and so on, but we may see that it is becoming a closed world, in the sense that it is becoming less welcoming actually, and more hostile to the stranger. And the Pope shows that the world in which we live have the tendency of developing things that are not helpful for the promotion of universal fraternity, that can even prevent it from growing. So we have many things, many laws, many rules, many, things else that can prevent fraternity to grow, that can prevent fraternity to get spread and so on, to become stronger than it is. And he says there are shattered dreams. Why? Because he took the example of Europe with the European Union, which was created with the goal of putting everyone together, with the goal of reaching unity, harmony. So maybe I won't say harmony, but at least unity and so on. But today those ideas are disappearing, unfortunately. And in Africa, you also have a similar organization called the African Union, which has, I would say, the same goal also, unity and so on. But unfortunately, actually, we may realize that the result, the outcome, may be different sometimes, even deeply or sadly, strongly different from the previous goal, the initial goal that was there. And that is the reason why the Pope says that this situation does not help social friendship to be built and to grow, because we are falling back into the same things that we have fought against. And this is a reminder that every generation has to take up the struggles and attainments of past generations. And this is also interesting because everything is not granted. Sometimes we may think that everything is granted, but every generation has to play its role in the process of building a fraternal love. And this is true also with evangelization. You cannot say that the work is done. The work is done. Missionaries in the past centuries have spread the good news. Now we do not have to do anything. Everything is done. No. Every generation actually has to, I would say, not do the entire work, but to continue the same work. So it has to be repeatedly done. We can't say, okay, it is done now, we will enjoy, we will sit somewhere and enjoy the fruits, the result of what our fathers did in the past and so on. And this is interesting. We can sit down and enjoy the fruits. And the Pope says something about nationalism versus solidarity. These are opposed. They can be opposed. They are not always opposed. They are not always against each other. You can, we will see how, because nationalism can go with solidarity, but most of the time, unfortunately, it goes without solidarity, chiefly towards those that we consider as being foreigners, as being different, as coming from I don't know which background, and so on. And nationalism in itself, I would say, is good, or is neither good nor bad. It depends on how actually it is done. It depends on all of those things. Because we belong, as I said, to a group, to a community, which can be an ethnic group, a tribe, or even a country, and so on. So loving your country is good, right, Alexander?
Depends. It depends.
With football and
Yeah, we see it, for example, when countries are playing football. We saw it with the recent European competition. So you see everyone holding the flag, being proud finally. And this is good, to love your country, to fight for your country, for the safeguard of your country. It is when there are competitions, football, and also Olympic games and so on. You see that people are extremely happy and proud of their countries. And you may see it even when the country loses, they still support the country. They are sad. And the more you are sad, finally shows how deep your love for your country was. So this can be one of the reasons. But so that is good, to love your country. It is good to love your region, the city you were born in, you grew up in, and so on. For example, me, I have good memories of the city I grew up in. Really very good memories. And I went there recently, and I saw it had been how many years? 13 years, I think. The last time I went there was 13 years ago. So coming back after 13 years and seeing that many things have changed, this is interesting actually. So this to show that loving your country, your region, your city is good in itself. But when the love you have for your country leads you to exclude the others, in that way you may ask yourself the question whether the way you love your country is a good way or not, because nationalism and solidarity, I would say, can match. They can match. For example, I don't know who talked about it, but saying that we all love our parents, for example. You love your mom, your mother, but the love you have for your mother is not against or does not prevent you from loving your friend's mother, for example. You see, they can match. So it does not mean that when I love my mother, I will not have the opportunity of loving others' mothers. So it can match. It is not against each other. So here also we can, I would say, take the same example and show that there is no opposition between them. But when it comes to say everything for me, nothing for others, when it comes to exclude others in an unjust way, in that way, according to the Pope, it may be selfishness under the guise of defending national interest. You know, it can be hidden. You may pretend defending national interest, but you are actually maybe excluding others under that guise, and this is sometimes a temptation which is strong but hidden. So then the love that one has for one's country does not compel one to hate others' countries. You can really love your country. You can, and it is an honor, as we said, to do so. Defend your country without disliking others' countries. And there is actually a basic rule that is more important than it seems. It is at the basis, at the foundation of social friendship. And the Pope says something also about a throwaway world. So it's also one of the things that he noticed, and one of the things that I would say have invited or gave him the idea of writing something about fraternity and social friendship. Not only friendship, but social friendship. Social friendship, it's a kind of friendship which is larger than friendship with people living in my area, for example. But social friendship, it puts people together. So here he denounces the throwaway aspect of our world. Some, for example, are sacrificed for the sake of others. The birth rate is declining in a worrisome way with its consequences, says the Pope. The human rights seem to not be equal for everyone. Some people seem to benefit from them more than the others. And the gap between the poor and the rich is sometimes very huge, worrisome, and so on. And war also and terrorism are saddening the world and putting fear in people's hearts. Those are things that the Pope mentions in the encyclical letter. We have also had the opportunity of, unfortunately, witnessing what is going on finally in our societies, saddening people and so on. And this is one of the things that can be resolved, I would say, with fraternity, social friendship, with charity and true solidarity. But the Pope, despite everything that he depicted, he said that we are allowed to keep the hope. There is hope, and this is actually good to mention. There is hope because God never abandons his children. God never abandons his children. And there is a passage here that I would like to read. It is actually from the encyclical letter number 52. It says this. I think it is 52 or another. I have to check. Maybe I didn't note it down. So he says this. I invite everyone to renewed hope, for hope speaks to us of something deeply rooted in every human heart, independently of our circumstances and historical conditioning. Hope speaks to us of a thirst, an aspiration, a longing for a life of fulfillment, a desire to achieve great things, things that fill our heart and lift our spirit to lofty realities like truth, goodness and beauty, justice and love. Hope is bold. It can look beyond personal convenience, the petty securities and compensations which limit our horizon, and it can open us up to grand ideals that make life more beautiful and worthwhile. Let us continue then to advance along the paths of hope. So, despite everything, there is hope. As if something was wrong here with the live streaming. I just will come back. So, then hope, we are allowed actually to keep the hope. We are allowed to keep the faith. We are allowed to keep also the charity that comes from God. Those three theological virtues are from God. You cannot, I would say, gain charity because of good deeds that you did. Charity, hope, and faith are from God, and they are given to us freely actually. And Saint Thomas Aquinas teaches that hope has two objects: God himself and also the means to attain it. So when God calls, he gives the grace to respond to his call. When he entrusts you with anything, he gives you what you need actually to achieve it. He gives you the graces you need to achieve it. And here, for the Good Samaritan, it is a parable which revealed clearly what the Pope wants to insist on in this encyclical letter, brotherhood and sisterhood. I always like to add sisterhood because it is more complete like this, even though saying brotherhood is also about everyone actually. But a stranger here, the Good Samaritan, someone that you haven't yet met, that you haven't met before, can actually be your neighbor. Someone that you haven't yet met can be your neighbor. I don't know if you know the story of Saint Maximilian Kolb. You heard about Saint Maximilian Mary Kolb from Poland, a Polish priest who died during the Second World War because he took the place of someone else who was condemned actually. Because there was a rule. The rule is when anyone escapes from the camp, the concentration camp, 10 people would have been selected randomly to die in the starvation camp place, bunker, I think. And it was the case. And someone was able actually to flee, to go away, and the other prisoners didn't realize that he was missing. So when the chief of the prison came, he realized that one was missing, and then he selected randomly 10 so that they may die because they didn't prevent the other one from going away, but they could not do anything actually. So they were there to die. So among the 10, selected ones was a father of a family, and he was weeping actually, saying, "Oh my God, I'm gonna die. I have my wife and my children. I won't see them back anymore. I'm gonna die." And Saint Maximilian was there. He heard, and he took pity on him, and he said, "I will replace this man, because not only I am old," but he was not really old. He was less than 50. "But I am, a priest, a Catholic priest. And I am sick. My life won't serve anymore. I'm gonna die to save this one's life." And the chief of the camp accepted. So Maximilian Mary Kolb died, and that person was saved actually. And he was not only saved that day, but he was released later after the World War. He was released, and he was there for the beatification of Maximilian Mary Kolb, and also for the canonization in Rome. He was then. It was worthwhile actually for him to do such a great thing, and here he showed that he could be a neighbor of someone he did not know before. And that is the same that we see also here in the parable of the Good Samaritan. And the parable reveals clearly that, brotherhood does not have to have any boundary. It does not have to be limited to people, we know, but it is without any boundary, without any limit actually. It is beyond those considerations that we may have. And in the parable we see that the person was lying on the ground, and there was a priest, I think, who came, who didn't care. There was another person, a Levite, who came, who didn't care. But when the stranger came, he took pity on him, and then he did his best so that the person who was lying on the floor on the ground may have some help, so that he may be saved finally. And this is, according to the Pope, what we are all invited to do, because while reading the parable we may ask ourselves, who am I? Because we may ask ourselves, who am I? Because the Bible has been written for us actually. The Bible is not a novel which we read and while considering ourselves as, spectators and so on. The Bible has been written for you. So when you read a Bible, you can ask yourself, who am I? And most of the time, we put ourselves on the right side. When you read the Gospel, for example, Martha and Mary, most of the time, we may put ourselves on the right side, and we may play actually the right role. But here, the Pope says that in the past, maybe we have been the priest who came and who didn't do anything, or the other person who came, who saw and who didn't give the help that was needed. We may also have been those who assaulted the man. Maybe in the past, through the way we behaved, we have also done wrong things to the other persons. But sometimes we also may be as the one lying on the ground. Maybe you have been victim of anything. And also, fortunately, sometimes you may also be like the Good Samaritan, who gave his help and who gave his time. Because sometimes giving your time can be more difficult than giving some money. Taking money and giving maybe really without any effort than giving your time. So he gave his time. He didn't give only the money he had, but he gave his time. And this is actually interesting. And the Pope says that the opportunity is given to us to choose who we want to be. We are invited to be a good Samaritan to our brothers and sisters. So the right question, if you have followed, the right question is not who is my neighbor. This is not the right question. The right question is to whom or for whom do I have to be a neighbor? That is the right question. I have to make myself the neighbor or a neighbor for others. Not to be asking who is my neighbor, but I have actually to make myself a neighbor for others. This is actually finally the main message hidden behind this parable. Who is my neighbor? Okay, but I have to make myself a neighbor. I have to imitate finally the example of the Good Samaritan. We could have even read the passage to remember what happened, but it is a well-known passage, and fraternity has no boundary. It has no boundary. We can notice that, it is a stranger who helped here. So fraternity is not reserved only to people from my circle, from my community, but it is for everyone. It is for everyone, actually. So this is the right question that we could actually ask ourselves. Who is my neighbor? And now, if I had to ask you, because you also might have opinions about it, to ask you a question about this. How can I imitate the example of the Good Samaritan? How am I involved in what went on in this parable? How would you do, or what would you do in your if that was the case for you? Do you have any steps, any steps to make yourself a neighbor for others in your day-to-day life? For example, at university, or in your workplaces with your colleagues and so on, or with someone who did wrong things for us. For example, I won't mention what happened, but sometimes we may face sad situations, and in those situations we may find it difficult to consider others as being brothers and sisters. Someone who did things that are not really friendly to us. When I see that person, I do not spontaneously consider him or her as a brother or as a sister. That is why forgiveness is also important in our relationship with one another. Forgiveness. But forgiveness does not mean forgetfulness. When you forgive, it does not forcibly mean that you forgot. I don't know if you have any experience to share about it. Forgetting, forgiving. Or in your day-to-day life, being able to show that actually you are not to expect from others to be, I would say, to show that you are their neighbor, but you are invited to make yourself as a neighbor. What would you say about all of those small questions? Did it already happen to you to forgive without forgetting, for example? Or when you forgive, you also forget about it, about what happened? Huh?
I do not think that I really forget to do it forgiving.
Yeah.
But I think it is a process of time and being ready for it. You can really want to forgive but sometimes you're not ready to forgive. But when you are with God's help ready to forgive, then you can still know it, but there's no frustration or anger or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Forgiving and forgetting do not always go at the same time together. You may forgive without forgetting. Why? Because you do not have power about your memory. You can't decide. For example, from now on, I decide to forget what I did yesterday. Is that is not possible, right? It may take time, and it may not depend directly on you to forget, but to forgive, yes. And also, when you forgive someone, maybe 1 month, 2 months, 1 year later, when you see that same person, or when you go to the same place when that person did bad things to you, you may even be sad. You may think of it, not forget, and those memories may come back. And in that case, actually, we are invited to renew the forgiveness that we made, that we gave, to renew it. At every time you actually think of it, you are invited to renew it. Okay, I forgave yesterday, but today I am still invited to renew the forgiveness I give. That is what God does with us also, renewing the forgiveness that He gave. And this is actually important in the process of building a peaceful society where everyone is a brother, a sister, not a stranger. Okay, that is okay, but a stranger who is a brother. You see, a foreigner who is a brother. So this is interesting, according to me, to highlight, so that we may not only build a peaceful society, but also a society where happiness, where understanding, where solidarity finally prevail. That is what I would say.
Yeah, for me, I think if it's a stranger, it still may be easier, but like I cannot say I consider the thief from my car as a brother.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that is why I did not want to mention it directly, but in those situations, it is extremely hard. And you are right to have that feeling. If you did not have that feeling, it would be even I would say difficult.
It's okay. The theft fine. But I won't consider that person as a brother.
Yes, but you see, there is a difference between the behavior of a person and the person himself, I would say. There is a difference, and God also does a difference between the sin and the sinner. God loves the sinner, but He does not love the sin. You see? So, but you can't just make a distinction, but you can separate. I can't, for example, in front of a person, say, okay, this is the sin. I take it, I put it on this side, and this is the person. I can't just make a distinction, but finally, concretely, they are united. But even so, we still can go beyond what we experience to realize that a person is always bigger than his actions. You see, a person is always bigger than his actions. A person cannot be identified entirely to his actions. Otherwise, even for us, and then God wouldn't have made, I would say, the distinction between the sin and the sinner, because he loves everyone, even sinners. He gave up his life for sinners, and he said, I did not come for the just, for those who consider themselves as being just, but I came for sinners and for those who want actually to make some progress and to finally receive the good news of salvation and come back to the Lord. And you see that, yeah, that is interesting, but it is also understandable to not consider someone who did bad things to us as a brother spontaneously. Those feelings are understandable. You see, humanly speaking, they are understandable. I would be surprised if someone, for example, whose car was broken says, oh, he is my brother, I love him.
No problem.
No problem, come back. Okay, next time I will put, this time it was a computer. Next time I will put 2 computers, come back, you are my brother. No. That is not the normal reaction. You see, it is not normal reaction. And it is understandable. It is understandable, but and it is natural. What is not natural, what is beyond, is, for example, when you pray for that person. You see that, naturally speaking, it is painful. But when you kneel down and pray for that person, you yourself realize that what I am doing is bigger than myself. I can't pray for someone who did wrong to me. I can't pray for someone who did not actually pray for me, or someone who took away from me what I gained in a right way, you see. And I myself has been also a victim of things like that. But for me it was less important. It was a camera in my room itself. It was stolen in my room itself, and it's hard to realize. And also recently in my own country, my sister and her husband, they faced the same situation actually, and it was even more serious, because the robber took not only a bag with a computer but also a lot of money, and they were in front of a supermarket, I think, or I don't know if it is a shop. Anyway, a shop. They went into the shop to try things. They stayed for about half an hour, and when they came back, it was broken. So the computer, which was from the place she works, and other things and so on, mobile phone and so on. In that situation, it is extremely hard to consider the other person as a brother. But praying for that person is a way of going beyond his action, and of praying for his conversion, finally, for his conversion. So it does not actually prevent us from considering everyone as brothers and sisters. But yeah, we are aware of one thing: we need God's grace. That is why at the beginning I said that there is a link between faith, finally, and fraternity. Faith and fraternity. Otherwise, how can that be possible? On seeing what is happening in the world, how can that be possible? Faith and fraternity are linked, I think. So, I think we've 9:30 now. You have been listening for many times now. I don't know if you want to share about anything else, but maybe we can, for this first session, stop here. And next time we can go further, and it can be even more, I can prepare something so that it may be more interaction and so on. We may be able to share things that is also fruitful and helpful. Next time is next Friday. If you are still free, invited to join. And it will be another topic related to Fratelli Tutti. And the third time will be still another topic related to the same encyclical letter, Fratelli Tutti. Thank you well.
Thank you.